balls. Balls. That got your attention, didn't it? I suppose it also probably got this video, what do they call it? Shadow banned, suppressed.
Balls.
Although I didn't technically swear in the first 30 seconds. Balls isn't a swear word. I mean, I could be talking about soccer balls or footballs or, in this case, eyeballs, which is perfectly legit.
Eyeballs.
Innocent thing to be talking about. What did you think I meant?
Balls.
Eyeballs. And specifically the pseudo-echo science of optography. And I have to say that once I learned the term, I was so enamoured by it, I was inspired to write something, which we're going to talk about a little bit today, called, what was it called? The Last Picture Show. Before I talk about it, if you want to read it and sort of have some context for what I'm going to build this video around, you can read that below somewhere. I'll actually read it to you. That's up to you.
Read it.
In it, that thing I wrote, I do a little thinky-think time about a big subject. What, pondered I? Pondered I, is that the right way of... That's probably bad grammar.
Grammar.
What, pondered I? What will it be, the last thing that I see, at the moment of my departure from this current hellscape?
Of all the timelines, this is clearly the darkest.
The throwing of my mortal coil into a kicking bucket and the ashes to ashes, dust to dusts of it all. Cheery, no? Balls. One. I wrote it, so you should read it. Somebody should. And 2, what is optography? What means it? More bad grammar.
English is a very fluid language.
Moving on. I called it pseudoscience before, and I should probably be a little careful in calling it that since the turn has wormed, and pseudoscience is now real science, and actual science is the pseudo-echo science. Pseudo-echo, just throwing this in here, classic Australian band from my teen years. Part of the Australian New Wave, or maybe even New Romantics, if you want to categorise them, put them in a box. Their biggest hit was a cover. But I was always partial to some of their earlier songs, like There's a Beat for You. The fits in that video. Fire! But I digress. It's pseudoscience, not pseudo-echo science. I just said it like that because my brain is what it is.
Your brain is haunted.
In late 19th century forensics, she says, pushing glasses up bridge of nose, optography was quite popular. This totally legit bullshit science
Chillingly plausible.
theorised that the image of the last thing you saw at the moment of your death could, in theory, as I said, theorised, be imprinted on the retina in the back of the eye. Of course, duh. Balls! Captured, immortalised, right in there, in your peepers. Snap, snap, snap. Not that you really just did that now, but science! Pseudo. Wait, are you for real? The realist. Seriously, that was the theory. And now I shall effortlessly weave in some facts that I have half read to make this video too long. Can you feel it? Too long. You're welcome. Don't write any of this down. And if you do, maybe use a pencil. Because you might want to, I was going to say use a rubber, but this is America, and that does not mean the same thing in this country.
That's an eraser.
Listen up! Have you heard the name Jack the Ripper? The following, what I'm about to read to you, is an excerpt from something that I read. I'll put the link to all the things that I'm going to read from below, because I do research. Quote, a September 13, 1888 article in the London Star questioned whether an image of the Whitechapel killer, capable of reproduction, may have been imprinted inadvertently, that's a hard word to say, inadvertently upon the retina of Annie Chapman as the unfortunate victim took a final glimpse of her killer. And then it goes on to talk about some grisly shit involving intestines and... And in case you missed it, they're talking about the Whitechapel killer who became known as Jack the Ripper later on. And Annie Chapman was his second victim. That guy. Balls! Now, you might be rolling your eye, balls, at this moment, because who would ever believe that you could, capture an image, like a photograph, on your retina, in your eyeball, and in turn have that image be used to identify your killer? Who would believe that?
Well, no one would believe that.
Well, I'm happy to report that, much like now, people will believe anything. Zing! Searing social commentary. Before we get into my penciled-in explanation of the science, let's take a moment of silence for the frogs and rabbits. What frogs and rabbits? You'll see. Moment of silence. Where did the idea of optography come from? Well, frogs and rabbits were involved. By way of setup, let me just ask you to keep this in the back of your mind. Think of your eye as a camera and your retina as film. Just implant that in the back of your brain. Okay, first, frog. In 1876, a dude by the name of Franz Balls was trying to figure out how the retina worked. He employed the services, they didn't volunteer, and he didn't pay them, of frogs. Anyway, he discovered in the rods of a frog's retina a brilliant red pigment, which would eventually be known as rhodopsin. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it from this point on. Rhodopsin. He noticed that the rhodopsin in the frog's eye turned a pale white when exposed to light, essentially bleaching the retinal pigment. Kind of how a photographic plate works, I think. Don't quote me on that. Pencil. I can already feel your eye balls glazing over. Stick with me.
This one's eyes are dead.
So the discovery of rhodopsin, that's step one. Franz Balls. A year later, a German dude by the name of Wilhelm Kuhn. There's umlauts in the name and everything. I'll put it here. He'd basically become the president of the Rhodopsin fan club.
Bullshit.
He didn't really, I just made that bit up. But anyway, he got real hot under the collar about rhodopsin. And now I shall quote from an article called Eye and Camera, written by a Nobel Prize-winning biochemist. So what he was? Biochemist. George Wald, who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1967. This is what he says. Quote, in his first paper on retinal chemistry, Kuhn said, bound together with the pigment epithelium, the retina behaves not merely like a photographic plate, but like an entire photographic workshop, in which the workman continually renews the plate by laying on a new light-sensitive material while simultaneously erasing the old image. End quote. Are the pieces coming together for you yet? He's talking about the ability to take a picture with your eyeballs.
No way!
And this is where, moment of silence for the rabbits. Trigger warning. I'm still quoting from the previous article. One of Kuhn's early optograms was made as follows. Brace yourself. An albino rabbit. Why albino, do you think? An albino rabbit was fastened with its head facing a barred window. From this position, the rabbit could see only a grey and clouded sky. The animal's head was covered for several minutes with a cloth to adapt its eyes to the dark. That is, to let the rhodopsin accumulate in its rods. Then the animal was exposed for 3 minutes to the light from the window. It was immediately decapitated, the eye removed and cut open along the equator, and the rear half of the eyeball containing the retina laid in a solution of alum for fixation. The next day, Kuhn saw, printed upon the retina in bleached and unaltered rhodopsin, a picture of the window with a clear pattern of its bars. It looked like this. Yeah, right, sure. What an amazing story. The idea of being able to get an image from a dead person's eye.
Lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes.
Like a daguerreotype where you have a plate and you capture the image and fix it using a chemical reaction. I mean, there'll be an explanation of how daguerreotypes work below. Anyway, this thought that you could get this image from a dead person's eye of the last thing that they saw, that really captured the public's imagination at the time. I mean, think of the possibilities if you could really fix in an image like that and then print it in some way. And now I'm coming in hot with another quote here from an article I'm actually quoting a lot from by Arthur B. Evans. I'll come back to explain a bit more about that in a second. Quote, "It came to be believed, as a logical extension of this hypothesis, that if death were to occur at a moment when the pupils of the eyes were hugely dilated, for example, because of fear, surprise, anger, or some strong emotion, the retinal optograms of the deceased would be even clearer, more detailed, and easier to develop." I think that's why the murdering part is attached so heavily to this story. You got to be startled or afraid or something for it to, I mean, the potential in forensics, amazing. You could catch killers. Easy peasy. Here's a callback to poor Annie Chapman, victim of Jack the Ripper. We were talking about her earlier. Quote, "In an attempt to be scientific, the police pried open Annie Chapman's dead eyes and photographed them in the hope that the retinas had retained an image of the last thing she saw, but no images were found." End quote. Balls! Quote was from a historian at the time, taken from that same article that I mentioned earlier. The article, by Arthur B. Evans, was actually about optography in fiction. Yes, in fiction. Optography was mentioned in a story by Jules Verne called The Brothers Kip. He lists a lot of other things as well. But here's the thing. So you've got forensic science using it, you got writers using it as a fanciful kind of like a sci-fi concept, which, and then because the concept is kind of catching on and all the killers out there and murderers and people that are committing crimes aren't really sure if it's real or not, as a precaution, they started to pluck out, destroy, damage the eyeballs of their victims so that no evidence would be left behind. Missing eyes. This is a just gruesome story. Dead people's eyes, when squished or ripped out or damaged in some way, they don't tattletale. Snitches get thumbs. Wild. Balls. But that's what I mean by captured the public's imagination. It was, at one point, everywhere. It's a concept ripe for the fictional picking. Because it is fictional. It's bogus for a number of reasons. And now I will read something illuminating, even though you're probably incredibly bored by this. And maybe even for once in your life you're saying, when's she going to talk about the thing she wrote? Because she hasn't even got to it yet. It's a good point. We'll get to that in a second. Let me read this. We're going to read it double time. Quote, strap in.
It is a very romantic idea, but for a start, under normal daylight conditions, there's very little rhodopsin in the retina. It is only used for dawn, dusk, and night vision. It would be pointless to try to recover an image unless it had been formed under conditions of low illuminations, rod vision, nocturnal vision, and there would have to have been no illumination of the eye from the moment the image was seen to the time of fixation to the retina. Even the best images that we can see by nocturnal vision actually depend on quite small local differences in the concentration of rhodopsin, which would be enormously difficult to measure.
Stop me. This is a long paragraph. If you're really into optography and want to know more, there is plenty of additional info below. I got to get to the point of the thing I wrote, not do a deep dive into optography. Let's talk about the post instead. Super briefly now, because I don't want you to die of boredom. That would make the last image you see be of me, which actually we're going to get to in a minute. Okay, the last picture show. What will it be, the last thing that I see? People who've had near-death experiences, what do they always say they see? Like a white tunnel, or maybe they're outside of their body. How their life flashed before their eyes. That's a different thing entirely. That's not optography. That's more spirituality. This isn't that. We're talking about the actual physical eyeball working like paparazzi, snapping the last thing that you see. And me wondering, like, just the circumstance of that. The last shot of the last of you. Ooh, this is getting morbid. It doesn't have to be. What would I like the last thing that I see to be? I mean, I'm not going to rehash the whole post because I go through a whole laundry list of options before I arrive at what I think is the crux of the piece. But I will say, I think I might be quite partial to maybe being in a hammock, just quietly swinging, maybe reading like a book, and then I look up at the sky, and there's a canopy of trees. That'd be all right, right? I mean, there's this rumour that David Lynch passed away while meditating, which is so David Lynch. I don't know if that's true or not, but that doesn't sound too bad.
You wouldn't really know how sweet and how good a donut is if you'd never had that experience.
Is that confirmed? So if my eye is going to be like Annie Leibovitz, well, no, actually, because, I mean, nature might be more of an Ansel Adams photo of just like the canopy and looking up at the sky and black and white. Would it be black and white? They don't really go into that, do they? Just this peaceful swaying as I fade from vision, dispatched under the watchful eye of nature. Click, click, click. Here's a question. If optography were real, who would be collecting the photos? For what purpose? Where are they being stored? How is the image extracted? Like the police in that Jack the Ripper thing, they were opening the eyeball and taking a photo. Like, that doesn't sound very efficient. And, you know, technology at the time probably wasn't up to the task of extracting the image, so how would they do it today? Can you make more than one copy?
This is your brain.
Is it your God that's collecting it? What is your God doing with it? With the images of the last thing everyone in humanity ever sees? Do they get uploaded to the cloud? Does your God hold the most boring slide notes that your God shows all the other gods? And here is a photo of a hospital ceiling. And here's a remote under a couch. That's a flashing warning light. A cloudy sky. Another sky. Grass. You get my point. A mega slide night of humanity's last collected images. No one cares. Delete them. Don't think about your last image. Free up the memory space. That's what I was trying to get to, I think. Life isn't about the first or last of anything. It's about the now. A dying eye is still a living eye, and living is now. And perhaps we should be thinking less about what we will see, not about us, but how others see us while we are alive. Where's my soapbox? I don't need it. This will be short. I'm not saying that I will be the last thing that you see.
That may be weird.
Even though, you know, with the dying of boredom thing, which maybe you are right now, perhaps I am. But it's not a bad thing because this face. But I want to consciously think about how I will be seen by others rather than worrying about what the last thing I will see will be at the moment of my death. I don't want to think about my death. I want to think about my life as I'm living it. And I want to think about how people see me and make sure that what they see in me is love, is empathy, is understanding, is acceptance. That's what you'll see if the last thing you see be me. Balls. I hope it is the sky thing, the shy little cloud tootling by. Fade out. See you next time.